At 2:17 every morning, the dog returned to a hospital that had forgotten how to heal. St. Gabriel Medical Center had been closed for 8 months, its windows dark, its parking lot split by weeds, its red emergency sign faded beneath the rain. By sunrise, demolition crews would arrive. Their yellow machines already waited behind a chain-link fence, silent and enormous under the cold October sky. But the German Shepherd did not seem afraid of them. He lay beneath the main entrance canopy with his front paws crossed, his sable coat damp with mist, his amber eyes fixed on a single window 2 stories above the ground. Room 217. Staff Sergeant Ethan Cole noticed him during his final security round. Ethan had seen the dog every night that week, always after midnight, always alone, always facing the same window. He had left food near the entrance on Tuesday. The bowl remained untouched. On Wednesday, he brought fresh water. The dog drank only after staring at the second floor for nearly an hour. Tonight, Ethan stopped 20 feet away and listened. Rain whispered against the glass doors. Loose metal clicked somewhere near the loading dock. Beyond the fence, a demolition chain moved softly in the wind. The dog did not turn. "You know nobody is in there, right?" Ethan said. His voice sounded too loud in the empty parking lot. The German Shepherd's ears shifted, but his gaze never left the window. Ethan stepped closer. He was 38, broad-shouldered, with short brown hair and gray beginning to show near his temples. His marine field jacket was old but carefully kept, the fabric softened at the elbows. 2 dog tags rested beneath his shirt. One belonged to him. The other had not belonged to him for 6 years. He rarely touched them. Tonight, his fingers found them without thinking. The dog suddenly rose. Not fast, not frightened. Deliberately, his body became still, every muscle directed toward the hospital. Ethan followed his stare. A pale curtain moved behind the glass of room 217. There was no power in that wing. No open windows. No one authorized to be inside. Ethan felt the night tighten around him. The shepherd walked to the locked entrance and touched his nose to the door once. Then twice. Then a third time. He looked back at Ethan. It was not the look of a stray asking for shelter. It was the look of a trained animal waiting for someone to understand an order. A truck rolled into the lot behind them, its headlights washing the hospital walls in white. The demolition supervisor lowered his window. "Cole, get that dog off the property. We start at 6. Ethan kept his eyes on the shepherd. Above them, the curtain stopped moving. The dog gave one quiet breath and sat beside the door. Ethan studied the dark window, then the dog, then the silver numbers bolted above the sealed entrance. "He is not waiting for the building," Ethan said. And for the first time all week, the German shepherd turned and looked directly at him. The shepherd held Ethan's gaze for 3 long seconds, then turned back toward the sealed doors as if the answer had already been given. The demolition supervisor muttered something beneath his breath, raised the truck window, and drove toward the service lot. His taillights disappeared behind the rain. Silence returned. Ethan crouched several feet from the dog, careful not to reach too quickly. Years in the United States Marine Corps had taught him that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned in small, quiet movements. "Easy," he said. "I am not here to move you." The shepherd watched him from the corner of one amber eye. Water gathered along the dark saddle of his coat and slipped down his ribs. He was lean, but not starving. His paws were worn, his nails short, his posture balanced. This was not an animal that had wandered here by accident. Ethan noticed a faded leather collar beneath the thick fur around his neck. A narrow metal plate hung from it, dulled by weather and time. He reached slowly. The dog did not retreat, but his body tightened. "Hold," Ethan said without thinking. The word came from another life, spoken in the same low tone he had once used beyond the wire, when one wrong movement could turn a quiet road into chaos. The shepherd froze. His ears lifted. His breathing steadied. Ethan felt something cold pass through him that had nothing to do with the rain. He had known trained dogs before. They responded to commands, hand signals, changes in posture. But this one did more than obey. He recognized the language. Ethan extended 2 fingers and touched the plate. Mud covered most of the engraving. He rubbed it clean with his thumb. The first line read Rex. The second line was harder to see. He tilted the plate toward the parking lot light. "Carter family." Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. Beneath his shirt, the 2 dog tags seemed to grow heavier. One carried his own name. The other read Luke Carter. 6 years earlier, Ethan had promised himself that he would visit Luke's family. He had promised it during the flight home. He had promised it again at the memorial. Then weeks became months, and guilt found a permanent room inside him. He never made the call. He never knocked on their door. Rex leaned forward and sniffed Ethan's jacket. His nose moved toward the chain beneath the fabric. Ethan's hand closed around the tags. Metal clicked softly against metal. At that sound, Rex's expression changed. The guarded stillness left his eyes, replaced by something older and more painful. He stepped closer, pressed his nose against Ethan's chest, and released a faint breath. Ethan could feel the warmth of it through his shirt. "You knew him," he whispered. Rex backed away and looked toward the second floor again. Then he walked 3 steps toward the entrance, stopped, and glanced over his shoulder. The message was clear. Whatever waited beyond those doors had begun with Luke Carter, and Rex had finally found someone who carried the missing piece. Ethan unlocked the narrow security office beside the main lobby and motioned for Rex to follow. The shepherd crossed the threshold without hesitation, then stopped just inside, as if waiting for permission to go farther. "Come," Ethan said. Rex moved to his side. The room smelled of dust, old coffee, and warm electrical wires. 6 surveillance monitors glowed above a scarred metal desk, their pale light turning the abandoned hallways into silent gray tunnels. Most of the cameras had stopped working months ago, but 4 still covered the parking lot and the front entrance. Ethan pulled out the chair and searched the recordings from the previous week. Rex remained standing beside him, eyes fixed on the screens. Sunday night appeared first. At 2:17 in the morning, the shepherd entered the parking lot from the east sidewalk. He walked directly to the main doors, sat on the same square of concrete, and lifted his face toward the second floor. Monday was the same. Tuesday brought heavy wind, bending the young maple trees along the curb, but Rex arrived at 2:17. Wednesday, rain covered the lens in silver streaks. Still he came. 7 nights. 7 identical journeys. Not once did he wander toward the dumpsters or search beneath parked cars for food. He came with purpose, waited beneath room 217, and left just before dawn. Ethan leaned closer to the screen. "What were you told to do?" he whispered. Rex gave no sign that he heard. Ethan played Thursday night again, slowing the recording. At 2:29, Rex suddenly rose. His ears turned toward the building. 3 seconds later, the camera microphone caught a soft sound from somewhere inside, a faint metallic tap, followed by the scrape of something light across the floor. Rex had reacted before the sound reached the camera. Ethan checked the building report. No motion sensors had been triggered. No doors had opened. No maintenance crews had entered. He looked toward the dark hallway beyond the office, where the old elevators waited behind closed steel doors. The hospital seemed to be holding its breath. A cardboard archive box sat beneath the desk, filled with duty logs from the final month before St. Gabriel closed. Ethan lifted it onto the table and began turning pages. Most entries were ordinary. Water leaks, missing keys, transfer schedules. Then he found a note written in blue ink on the night of the evacuation. The handwriting was hurried but clear. Room 217. Boy refuses transfer without dog. Contact Margaret Hale before transport. Ethan read the sentence twice. Beneath it, someone had drawn a line through the words and written transferred at 2:17 in the morning. Rex placed one paw against Ethan's knee. Ethan looked down at him, then back at the timestamp. The dog had not chosen that hour by chance. It was the last moment someone had been taken from that room. Ethan searched the remaining pages for the boy's name, but the next sheet was missing, torn cleanly from the binding. Across the room, Rex turned toward the lobby. A quiet sound drifted through the sealed hospital. 3 measured taps. Rex stood, walked to the office door, and looked back at Ethan. This time, he did not need a command. The 3 taps came again, faint and evenly spaced, from somewhere beyond the lobby. Rex moved first. His paws crossed the dusty tile without hurry, yet every step carried certainty. Ethan followed with a flashlight in one hand and the old duty log in the other. The beam passed over empty wheelchairs, a silent reception desk, and a wall clock frozen at 2:17. At the elevators, Rex stopped and looked toward the stairwell. The metal doors had no power, but the call button above them glowed for one brief second, pale and impossible, before fading into darkness. Ethan felt the tags beneath his shirt touch against each other. "All right," he whispered. "Show me." Rex led him to the records room on the first floor, where patient files had been boxed for transfer before the hospital closed. The lock had already been cut by the demolition team. Inside, the air smelled of cardboard, dust, and the faint, clean trace of old antiseptic. Ethan found a terminal that still operated on emergency battery power. He searched room 217. The screen displayed no patient assigned there on the final night. He searched the evacuation time. No result. Then he entered the name Carter. One file appeared for less than a second before the system marked it archived and unavailable. Noah Carter, age 11. Ethan stared at the name until the letters blurred. Luke had spoken about Noah during deployment, usually in the quiet moments before sunrise. He had described a boy who loved baseball, hated peas, and believed every dog deserved a name before it deserved a command. Ethan had listened, smiled, and promised that someday he would meet him. Someday had become 6 years. He opened a nearby cabinet and searched the paper transfer folders. The first drawer held billing records. The second held nursing notes. In the third, behind a stack of blank discharge forms, he found a thin folder labeled with Room 217. Inside was a photograph of a pale boy sitting upright in a hospital bed, smiling beneath a navy blue blanket. Beside him sat a younger Rex, ears alert, one paw resting across the boy's ankle. Luke's eyes looked back at Ethan from the child's face. A handwritten note beneath the photograph read, "Noah Carter, Family Military Support Placement Pending." Ethan turned the page. The transfer destination had been blacked out, but one name remained untouched. Margaret Hale, registered nurse. A telephone number was written beside it. Ethan called. The line rang 5 times before an older woman answered with a cautious hello. Ethan identified himself and mentioned Noah, Rex, and Room 217. Silence followed, deep enough for him to hear rain tapping against the records room window. At last, Margaret breathed his name. "Ethan Cole," she said. "Luke told me about you." Ethan closed his eyes. "Is Noah alive?" Another silence. "Yes," she answered softly. "But you need to listen carefully. Do not let them tear down that room before you see what the boy left behind." Rex stood beside the doorway, staring toward the dark stairwell. Somewhere above them, a loose object scraped across the floor. Then came one final tap, directly overhead. Ethan ended the call and looked at the ceiling. The sound had stopped, but Rex was already moving toward the stairwell. The shepherd waited at the fire door until Ethan pushed it open, then climbed the first steps with his nose low and his ears forward. The stairwell was colder than the lobby. Damp concrete carried the smell of rainwater, rust, and old disinfectant. Ethan's flashlight swept across peeling paint, and evacuation arrows faded by time. Somewhere below, water dripped with the steady patience of a clock. "Stay close," Ethan said. Rex glanced back once, as if the warning belonged to both of them. On the landing between floors, the dog stopped so suddenly that Ethan nearly stepped beside him. Rex lowered his head toward a dark patch of flooring. Ethan moved the light and saw water spreading beneath the door from the damaged west wing. The surface looked shallow, but a section of tile had already sunk several inches. Rex turned away from it and chose the narrower maintenance passage. He was not simply searching. He remembered the building. The passage opened near the second-floor nurse's station, where overturned chairs rested beneath a thin blanket of dust. Rain whispered against the long windows. At the far end of the corridor, a pale curtain moved through an open doorway, breathing in and out with the draft. Rex advanced several feet, then paused to make certain Ethan followed. Each time the hallway divided, he chose without hesitation. Each time the ceiling creaked, he waited, listening before taking another step. Ethan had walked behind trained dogs in places where trust mattered more than sight. The rhythm returned to him now. Watch the ears. Read the shoulders. Never rush the animal that can sense what you cannot. A ceiling panel dropped softly behind them and scattered dust across the floor. Rex did not flinch. He guided Ethan around a cracked section of tile, past an abandoned medication cart, and beneath a red exit sign that flickered once before going dark. Then they reached the final corridor. Room numbers appeared one by one in the flashlight beam. 211, 213, 215. Rex slowed. His breathing changed. At room 217, he stopped completely. The door was closed, its small glass window covered from inside by a child's drawing taped to the pane. Rainbows had faded to pale lines, but the shape beneath them remained clear. A boy stood beside a German shepherd. Between them was a tall figure in a Marine uniform. Rex sat. He did not scratch the door or bark. He lifted one paw and placed it gently against the wood. Then he looked at Ethan. For 7 nights, Rex had crossed the sleeping city and waited below that window. He had returned at the exact hour Noah was taken away. Yet he had never forced his way inside. Ethan understood why. This was the last door Rex had watched close, and opening it had never been his part of the promise. Ethan reached for the handle. It did not move. He found the master key on his ring, slid it into the lock, and turned. The mechanism released with a quiet click. Rex lowered his paw. Ethan opened the door, and something small stirred in the darkness beyond. The small movement came from a paper airplane sliding across the floor, pushed by the cold draft from a cracked vent. It stopped against Ethan's boot. A child had written Rex across one wing in blue marker. The other wing carried a single word: home. Rex stepped into the room slowly, his nose testing the stale air. The space smelled of damp plaster, old fabric, and the faint medicinal trace that years of rain had not erased. A narrow hospital bed stood against the wall beneath the window. Its sheets were gone, but a navy blue blanket remained folded at the foot, embroidered with the emblem of the United States Marine Corps. Rex approached it and pressed his nose into the cloth. His tail moved once. Then it became still. Ethan swept his flashlight across the room. Pencil marks climbed the wall beside the bed, each one labeled with a date and Noah's height. For feet, 7 inches. For feet, 8 inches. The final line had no measurement beside it. Only a message written in careful block letters. Next time Rex comes, we measure together. On the windowsill sat a stainless steel water bowl. The name Rex had been scratched into the bottom. Beside it rested a framed photograph of Luke Carter kneeling between his son and the shepherd. Luke looked younger than Ethan remembered, his smile open, one hand on Noah's shoulder and the other buried in Rex's fur. Ethan lowered the light. For 6 years, he had carried Luke's name against his heart while avoiding every place that name might have asked something of him. Rex crossed to a wooden cabinet and touched it with his nose. Ethan opened the top drawer. Inside were crayons, a worn baseball glove, and a folded sheet of notebook paper sealed with clear tape. The front read, "For whoever finds Rex." Ethan sat on the edge of the empty bed and unfolded it. The handwriting was uneven, but every sentence was clear. They said Rex could not ride with me because there was no room. I told him I would come back. Please tell him I did not leave him. I will wait for him too. At the bottom, Noah had drawn a small map with an arrow pointing toward a place called Harbor House. Ethan felt Rex lean against his leg. Not begging, not trembling, simply holding contact, as if the dog had carried the weight of those words long enough and could finally set them down. Ethan took out his telephone and called Margaret Hale again. She answered before the first ring had fully ended. "I found the note," he said. Margaret released a quiet breath. "Then you know why he kept returning. Where is Noah now?" Papers shifted on her end of the line. "Harbor House, 12 miles east. He is alive, Ethan, and he has never stopped asking about that dog." Relief rose through Ethan so quickly that it almost hurt. Then Margaret's voice changed. "His aunt is moving him to Oregon this morning. Their car leaves at 5:30. Ethan checked his watch. 4:42. Outside, a diesel engine started in the demolition lot. Rex looked toward the door. Ethan folded Noah's note, slipped it safely inside his jacket, and stood. "Come on, Marine," he whispered. Rex was already running for the stairs. Ethan and Rex reached the lobby as the first demolition workers began unlocking the outer gate. The building no longer felt empty. It felt finished, as though it had held one last breath until the right person entered room 217. Ethan pushed through the glass doors, crossed the rain-dark parking lot, and opened the rear door of his truck. Rex jumped inside without hesitation. At 4:46, they pulled onto the highway beneath a sky slowly turning from black to deep blue. Harbor House was 12 miles east, beyond the river and the old freight district. At that hour, the streets were mostly clear, but every traffic signal seemed to hold them longer than it should. Rex stood behind the front seats, his paws braced against the floor, his eyes fixed through the windshield. He did not whine. He did not pace. He simply leaned forward, as if his entire body understood that another goodbye was approaching. Ethan drove with one hand and held Luke Carter's dog tag with the other. The worn metal was warm from years against his chest. "I should have gone to him," Ethan said. His voice was low beneath the steady sweep of the windshield wipers. Rex turned one ear toward him. "I had the address. I had the telephone number. I even drove past their neighborhood once." The memory returned with painful clarity. A quiet street. A child's bicycle near a porch. A German shepherd watching through a front window. Ethan had kept driving because facing Luke's family meant facing the promise he had failed to keep. "Your name was Rex, was it not?" he murmured. The shepherd stepped closer and placed his chin between the front seats. Ethan looked at him in the mirror. "You stayed. I ran." Rex did not judge him. Dogs rarely carried the cruelty of comparison. They knew presence, absence, scent, and return. They knew whether a hand came gently. They knew whether a voice meant home. Ethan tightened his fingers around the tag. Not this time. The clock on the dashboard changed to 5:12 as they crossed the river. Morning light spread along the water like a thin silver road. Margaret called and told him Noah's aunt was loading the car early. They might leave before 5:30. Ethan thanked her and ended the call. Rex sensed the urgency in his breathing and stood taller. Harbor House appeared 3 blocks later, a red brick residence beside a small chapel and a row of bare maple trees. A dark blue station wagon waited near the entrance with its rear door open. Boxes filled the cargo area. A white woman in a tan coat carried a suitcase down the front steps. Beside her walked a thin boy in a navy sweatshirt, holding a worn baseball glove against his chest. Rex became perfectly still. Ethan slowed the truck. The boy reached the station wagon and placed one hand on the door. Rex released a single sound, soft at first, almost too fragile to be called a bark. Noah stopped. The glove slipped from his fingers onto the wet pavement. He turned toward the truck, and even from 50 feet away, Ethan saw recognition move across his face like sunrise entering a dark room. Rex looked at Ethan, waiting. Ethan opened the door. "Go home," he said. Rex leaped down and ran toward the boy who had been waiting too. Rex crossed the wet pavement with the force of 7 lost nights behind him, then slowed before Noah as though afraid the boy might disappear if he moved too quickly. Noah stood frozen beside the station wagon, his face pale in the early morning light, his hands trembling at his sides. For one long second, neither of them moved. Then Noah whispered, "Rex." The shepherd lowered his head, took one careful step forward, and pressed his nose against the boy's chest. Noah dropped to his knees and wrapped both arms around the thick sable fur. Rex leaned into him with his full weight, his tail striking the pavement in slow, heavy beats. The sound was quiet, almost ordinary, but Ethan felt it somewhere deeper than hearing. Noah buried his face against the dog's neck. "I came back," he said. "I came back, but they said you were gone." Rex gave a soft breath and placed one paw across the boy's leg, exactly as he had in the photograph from room 217. Noah's aunt covered her mouth with one hand. The suitcase beside her remained forgotten on the steps. No one spoke for a while. Rain gathered along the edge of the roof and fell in silver drops around them. Morning traffic moved somewhere beyond the trees, but inside that small circle, time seemed to loosen its grip. Ethan approached slowly. Noah looked up at him without releasing Rex. The boy had Luke's eyes. That recognition stopped Ethan more completely than any command ever had. He removed the chain from beneath his shirt and separated the second dog tag from his own. The metal rested in his palm, worn smooth at the edges by 6 years of silence. "Your father gave me this before our last deployment ended," Ethan said. His voice remained steady, though every word felt heavy. "He asked me to bring it home to you." Noah stared at the tag. "You knew my dad?" "He saved my life," Ethan answered. "More than once. I should have come to see you years ago. I am sorry that I did not." Noah reached out and closed his fingers around the tag. Rex watched the movement, then rested his head against the boy's shoulder. Noah looked from the metal in his hand to Ethan's face. There was sadness there, but no anger. Only the tired understanding of someone who had already learned that people sometimes lose their way while trying to survive grief. "Maybe Rex brought both of you," he said. Ethan lowered his eyes. For the first time in years, the weight beneath his shirt felt different. Not lighter exactly. Honest. Noah's aunt stepped closer and explained that their move could wait. Harbor House had agreed to extend their stay, and Rex would be allowed to remain with Noah while new arrangements were made. At those words, the boy smiled through his tears. Rex lifted his ears, as if he understood every syllable. Ethan knelt beside them. Noah placed Luke's tag around his neck, then took Ethan's hand and pressed it gently against Rex's collar. 3 names. 1 promise. The rain began to ease, and a narrow line of gold appeared above the eastern rooftops. Behind them, the station wagon remained packed for departure. But no one opened the door. 3 months later, winter settled gently over the city, laying a thin white edge along rooftops and bare maple branches. St. Gabriel Medical Center was gone. The old walls, silent corridors, and dark second-floor windows had been reduced to an open field surrounded by temporary fencing. Yet one small piece of the building had survived. Ethan had returned before the demolition began and asked the supervisor for the metal room plate from the second floor. Now the silver numbers 217 hung above a cedar dog bed in the living room of a modest house near Harbor House. Rex slept beneath them every night. Noah's aunt had found work nearby, and the move to Oregon had been postponed indefinitely. Noah was stronger now. Color had returned to his face, and his laughter came more easily, especially when Rex stole one of his socks and carried it through the house like a captured flag. On Sunday afternoons, Ethan visited with groceries, library books, and a worn baseball glove he had carefully restored. He never arrived empty-handed, though Noah once told him he did not have to bring anything. Ethan had looked toward Rex and answered, "I am still learning how to show up." Some days they walked along the river, where Rex moved between them with quiet pride. Other days they sat at the kitchen table while Noah asked questions about Luke. Ethan answered honestly. He spoke about Luke's terrible singing, his habit of saving the last piece of chocolate for someone else, and the way he wrote Noah's name inside every notebook he carried. He did not make Luke into a legend. He gave him back as a father, a friend, and a man who missed home. On a cold evening near Christmas, snow began falling outside the living room window. Noah had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open across his chest. Luke's dog tag rested beside his hand. Rex lay on the rug below him, his head resting across Noah's feet, one ear lifting whenever the wind touched the glass. Ethan stood near the doorway with his coat over one arm. He looked at the room plate above the dog bed, its surface cleaned but still marked by age. For years, he had believed that grief was a locked room, something a person survived by never opening the door. Rex had taught him otherwise. Some doors remained closed only because the right hand had not reached them yet. Ethan crossed the room, lifted the book from Noah's chest, and placed it on the table. Rex opened his eyes. "Stay," Ethan whispered. The shepherd looked toward Noah, then back at Ethan, as if the command required no effort at all. Ethan turned off the lamp. Moonlight spread softly across the floor, touching the silver tag, the sleeping boy, and the old dog who had refused to forget. Above them, the number 217 caught the last light. It no longer marked a hospital room. It marked the place where 2 promises had finally found their way home.